of his docket 3 years into government. And of course, Eugene wasn't just the only cabinet secretary who spoke. Today we also saw Mwangi Kiunjuri, who is the cabinet secretary for devolution, coming in. And at this point, we will now bring in Franklin Mwendani. He is a governance and public policy expert. He is joining us from the city center studios just to help us assess how far we've come in terms of devolution, seeing as the Jubilee government came in with devolution. So we could say it's 3 years down the line for devolution. Franklin Mwendani, if you can hear me, how do you assess the Jubilee scorecard as far as devolution comes to mind?
Sorry?
How far do you assess the Jubilee scorecard as far as devolution it comes to mind?
Very much, Akisa. I would say that this being the sixth year after the passing of the Constitution, 2010, I would perceive that as a country we are moving in the right direction. It has been a while with very issues, toothing issues, but I'm sure in due course we shall be able to manage some of these handles that I would say are cropping up. For instance, issues on health, issues on involving some of the sector functions. That one will take time, but I'm sure in due course we are going to get it right. So for Jubilee, and as a member of Jubilee, I would say that we're in the right direction, and we are moving this government the way the Constitution anticipates that we should move.
So are you confident that devolution is functioning and would function well going ahead?
Akisa, you're not clear.
Franklin, are we confident that devolution is functioning, given the many issues we've had, especially when it comes to the relationship of the senators and the governors, and of course the county governments and the national government? Is it functioning for the mwananchi on the grassroots levels?
The Constitution under Article 96 is very clear on the role of Senate. And we are also trying to find a middle ground on how that function should be implemented. Whether the Senate should be added in terms of responsibility, whether they should have their responsibilities enhanced, whether they should also be given funds, the 1 billion shilling, so that they can be able to oversight or rather articulate their role as an organ. But again, I would say the governors themselves and what they're doing in the counties, the perception residents at the counties is not what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 anticipates. What the Constitution anticipates is a situation where the governor functions as an executive, but also someone who guides the county in terms of legislation and implementation, and leaving the role of legislation in and on both the Senate and the county assemblies. Akisa?
Franklin, there's the issue of funds in the counties. When matters corruption is mentioned, most of those that come into mind are governors in the counties and members of the county assembly and those who work for the county assembly. Have we devolved corruption? Is this one of the major failures when it comes to devolution?
No, corruption, Akisa, is a disease. I would say it's an ailment that has, gotten in all sectors, not just in Kenya, but across the world. In most of the countries, it's a stigma that eats into the economy, and if this ailment is not handled properly, I would say that we are bound to dysfunction. We are bound to collapse in terms of implementation, in terms of development. And the Jubilee government on its part has done partially what it's supposed to do. I'm saying partially because there are actions that are needed to be done, that are taken, which are not taken as yet. For instance, corruption in the forces, in the disciplinary forces, maybe the police units, it is really difficult for maybe the president from where he sits to go to the grassroots, to every police station, and inquire about the corrupt actions of individual police officers. But there are structures in so doing. There are structures that needs to be followed. Now it is now up to the cabinet from where the president sits and chairs, that all those officers, rather the structure itself, should be looked into so that those that are responsible for certain functions should function appropriately, and stand action taken against maybe officers that are corrupt. And in China, we have seen people being put to the guillotine, being killed. For Kenya, we need to also agree and come up with a clear-cut action against people who are not just perceived as corrupt, but who have been caught and prosecuted in the practices of corruption. The ESCC itself, the Anti-Corruption Commission of Kenya, it needs to develop teeth. A dog that cannot bite, I'm sure soon enough the country will come up in arms again, trying to pull it down, because it's just like having a dog that that only barks but cannot bite. So let us see the government.
To short a bit, Franklin, yes. Even as we talk about dire consequences for those who perpetrate corruption and steal from the public, there's the issue of funding, and when there's the issue of funding in county governments, there comes the issue of the number of county governments we have. Is 47 a huge number? Is there a need to cut it down to perhaps 10 or a lesser number than that?
No, the number of counties, Akisa, that we have is not an issue. The Constitution anticipates a proper representation of this nation. I would not say from where I sit that we need to reduce the number of counties. That is out of question. What there is the counties themselves, they need firstly to look at two issues. One, on how they generate local revenue, and two, on how they manage the national revenue that has been passed down from the national government. On issues of personnel, I'm sure, Akisa, as we speak, the country out there, the people out there still need services. Services that will be given by personnel, by people that are employed by the government, by people that are employed through the public service commissions. Now, issues of corruption in the county, Akisa, I would say that the officers who are charged both in the legislative organ and the Senate and also in the assemblies, the officers need to maybe be given performance contracts, so that if an officer is not able to function according to that performance contract, it has to be reintroduced, because it has been there before. It has to be introduced and evaluation conducted.
Franklin. Yes, thank you very much, Franklin, for those insights you have on devolution. We will be